Breaking news tonight out of New York City. Billionaire tech mogul Alexander Whitmore, one of America's most powerful and private business figures, has just made a shocking public confession during a high-profile charity gala in Manhattan. Witnesses say the entire ballroom fell silent when Alexander suddenly abandoned his prepared speech, looked directly at a woman in the crowd, and said words no one saw coming. His voice trembled as he confessed, "The greatest mistake of my life wasn't losing billions, it was losing the woman I never stopped loving." That woman? Simone Carter. The woman he broke. The woman he never forgot. The woman he secretly watched from a distance for years. The cameras flashed relentlessly outside the grand entrance of the Whitmore Foundation annual charity gala. Luxury vehicles lined the streets of Manhattan. The city's elite had gathered under one roof. CEOs, investors, politicians, celebrities. Everyone who mattered in New York's upper circles was there. Inside the magnificent ballroom, crystal chandeliers illuminated the room in golden light, while soft classical music floated through the air. Everything looked flawless, perfect, elegant, exactly how Simone Carter wanted it. Simone stood near the back of the ballroom, tablet in hand, scanning every corner with sharp focus. Every floral arrangement was in place. Every VIP table was properly arranged. The lighting was perfect. The catering team was on schedule. The press area was under control. Everything had to be perfect. It had to be. Tonight was the biggest event of her career. At 34, Simone Carter had built her event planning company from the ground up. No family wealth, no rich connections, no shortcuts, just relentless hard work, sleepless nights, sacrifice, and grit. She fought for every opportunity, and tonight's gala could change everything. If this event succeeded, her company would officially enter a completely different league. Luxury clientele, billionaire clientele, the kind of opportunities event planners dreamed about. Her assistant hurried toward her. "Simone, final confirmation from the speech team. Mr. Whitmore will be arriving in 5 minutes." Simone gave a calm nod. "Good. Keep the press from crowding the east entrance." Her assistant smiled nervously. "You okay?" Simone raised an eyebrow. "Why wouldn't I be?" Her assistant hesitated. "Because you've checked the seating arrangement 6 times in the last 20 minutes. Simone sighed. "Tonight matters." Her assistant softened. "You've got this." Simone gave a faint smile. "I know. But the truth was, she felt something strange tonight. Something she couldn't explain. A heaviness, a tension in the air. Like something bigger than business was waiting for her." She brushed the thought away. This was just stress, nothing more. Across town, inside the back seat of a black luxury SUV, Alexander Whitmore adjusted the cuff of his suit. Calm, controlled, unreadable. At 38, Alexander had become one of the most powerful men in America. His name carried influence in every room. Tech, finance, real estate, investment. He had built an empire. People admired him, feared him, respected him, but almost no one truly knew him. Alexander stared out the tinted window as Manhattan lights blurred past. His assistant sat across from him, reviewing schedules. "Your speech has been finalized. Press interviews begin immediately after the gala. Investors from California requested a private breakfast meeting tomorrow." Alexander barely responded. Then his assistant added, "The event planner received excellent reviews." Alexander's gaze shifted. "What's her name?" His assistant checked the file. "Simone Carter." Everything stopped. The silence inside the car became suffocating. His assistant looked up. "Sir?" Alexander didn't move, didn't blink. For one terrifying second, the past slammed into him. Simone. It couldn't be. Not her. After all these years. His jaw tightened. "What did you say?" His assistant repeated carefully. "The event planner. Simone Carter." Alexander's pulse turned uneven. There were thousands of women with that name. It didn't mean anything. It couldn't mean anything. Still, a dangerous feeling rose in his chest. He asked one question, quietly. "How old?" 34. Silence. Alexander leaned back slowly. His chest tightened. It was her. After 10 years, it was her. The woman he had spent years trying, and failing, to forget. The woman whose heart he shattered. The woman he had loved more than anyone. "Simone." His assistant frowned. "Is something wrong?" Alexander's voice returned cold and controlled. "No, but everything was wrong. Because suddenly, the one woman he had no right to face again, was waiting for him tonight. 10 years. 10 years since he walked away. 10 years since he made the worst decision of his life. 10 years since he convinced himself leaving was the right thing to do. Yet, somehow, not a single day passed without thinking about her. Not one. The SUV stopped. "We're here." Alexander stared ahead. His heartbeat was louder now. For the first time in years, the billionaire who intimidated entire boardrooms felt nervous. Not nervous, terrified. Inside the ballroom, final preparations continued. Then suddenly, security earpieces buzzed. Mr. Whitmore has arrived. The energy shifted instantly. Everyone straightened. The atmosphere changed. Simone exhaled slowly. Showtime. She adjusted her blazer. Professional, focused, calm. Just another client. Nothing more. The ballroom doors opened. Alexander Whitmore entered. Tall, sharp, commanding. Every eye turned toward him. Power moved with him. But Alexander noticed none of it. The moment he stepped inside, his eyes found her. Simone, standing near center floor, tablet in hand, hair falling elegantly over one shoulder. Graceful, beautiful, stronger, older, and somehow even more breathtaking than memory allowed. His chest tightened painfully. Simone looked up. Their eyes met. Everything froze. The music, the crowd, the noise. Gone. 10 years disappeared in one breath. Her expression changed instantly. Confusion, recognition, shock, then something colder, much colder. Pain. Alexander saw it. The hurt he caused. The wound he left behind. Simone's body went still. Her fingers tightened around the tablet. No, 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 no. Not him. Anyone but him. But there he was. Alexander Whitmore. The man who vanished from her life without explanation. The man who broke her. The man she spent years rebuilding herself after. Standing right in front of her. Her heart pounded violently. Her chest tightened. Not from love. Not from longing. From shock and buried pain. He took one step forward. Then another. Simone forced herself to breathe. No. She refused to fall apart here. Not tonight. Not in front of him. Not ever again. Alexander stopped in front of her. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to say. Simone recovered first. Professional mask on. Emotion locked away. Her voice came out cool and controlled. Good evening, Mr. Whitmore. The formality hit him hard. Mr. Whitmore, not Alexander. Not Alex. Mr. Whitmore. Distance. Walls. Coldness. She continued. I'm Simone Carter, lead planner for tonight's event. As if they were strangers. As if they had never loved each other. Alexander looked at her carefully. He spoke softly. I know who you are. Simone's expression hardened. A dangerous silence settled between them. This wasn't just a reunion. This was a collision. Between past and present. Between regret and pain. Between unfinished love and buried wounds. And neither of them was ready for what would happen next. The silence between Simone and Alexander stretched for several long seconds. Neither moved. Neither looked away. To everyone around them, it probably looked like a normal interaction between an event planner and her high-profile client. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Simone's pulse thundered in her ears. She hated this. Hated how one look at him had dragged buried emotions back to the surface. She had spent 10 years rebuilding herself. 10 years healing. 10 years learning how to live without answers. And now the man responsible for some of the darkest nights of her life stood inches away from her. Still calm. Still unreadable. Still dangerous. To her peace. Simone forced herself back into work mode. Professional. Controlled. Safe. She straightened slightly. Your private security team has already been briefed. The press interview will begin after your opening speech, and dinner service starts at exactly 7:30. Alexander heard her words, but he was barely processing them. Because all he could think was one thing. She was really here. Simone. Not a memory. Not a regret. Not a ghost from his past. Real. Alive. Standing right in front of him. More beautiful than he remembered. Stronger, too. He noticed the way she held herself now. Confident. Guarded. Nothing like the woman who once wore her heart openly around him. That version of Simone was gone. And he knew exactly who killed it. He did. Simone? Her eyes sharpened instantly. Professional mask still in place. Mr. Whitmore, she corrected firmly. The distance in her voice hit him like a punch. Alexander swallowed. I think we need to talk. Her expression didn't change. No. The answer came instantly. Cold. Final. Alexander stared at her. Simone continued calmly. Tonight is about business. Nothing more. Then she stepped aside. If you'll excuse me, I have work to do. She moved to walk past him. Alexander reacted before thinking. Please. One word. Quiet, but heavy. Simone stopped. Not because she wanted to. Because that word sounded different. Not commanding. Not arrogant. Desperate. She slowly turned. For the first time, she saw something in his expression she wasn't prepared for. Regret, raw and unmistakable. Alexander lowered his voice. I know I don't deserve your time. Simone's jaw tightened. No, he didn't. You're right, she said. The words landed hard. Alexander accepted them. Because they were true. Simone looked directly into his eyes now. Years of pain burning beneath her calm exterior. Do you know what's amazing? Alexander stayed silent. She gave a bitter laugh. 10 years. Her voice shook slightly despite her effort to control it. 10 years, Alexander. Hearing his name from her lips again hit him deep. But there was no warmth in it. Only pain. Simone continued. For 10 years, I asked myself the same questions. Why? What happened? What did I do wrong? She stepped closer. Not in intimacy, in confrontation. Her voice dropped. Did I matter so little to you that I wasn't even worth a goodbye? The question cut deeper than anything else. Alexander's chest tightened painfully, because there was no defense, no explanation that could erase what he did, no justification good enough. He had broken her. Simone's eyes glistened, but her tears never fell. I loved you. The words came out quietly, painfully, truthfully, and one day, you were just gone. Alexander felt his throat tighten. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times. None of those versions prepared him for the reality of her pain. Simone, No. She stopped him. Not ready. Not willing. You don't get to explain now. Her breathing grew heavier. You had 10 years. Silence. Alexander felt every word. Every accusation. Every wound. Deserved. All of it. Around them, the gala continued. People talked. Laughed. Champagne glasses clinked. No one noticed the emotional war happening in this corner of the ballroom. Simone shook her head. I'm not that girl anymore. Alexander looked at her. She was right. The woman in front of him had changed. Pain had changed her. Silence had changed her. Life had changed her. And somehow, that reality hurt even more. Because he had missed everything. Every struggle. Every victory. Every heartbreak. He had watched from a distance. But watching wasn't the same as being there. And tonight, for the first time, he fully understood the weight of that truth. Simone stepped back, walls rising again. Professional mask returning. This event matters to me. Her voice steadied. I worked too hard for tonight to let the past ruin it. Alexander nodded slowly. He understood. She wasn't giving him anything. Not forgiveness. Not conversation. Nothing. And he had earned that. Then the event coordinator rushed over. Ms. Carter, 5 minutes until opening speech. Simone nodded. I'll be there. The coordinator left. Simone looked at Alexander one last time. Cold. Controlled. Unreadable. But behind those eyes, pain still lived, and Alexander hated himself for putting it there. She spoke quietly. Whatever you came here for tonight, Mr. Whitmore. A pause. Then the final blow. It's too late. She turned and walked away. Alexander stood frozen, watching her leave. That familiar ache returned, only worse. Because now he wasn't haunted by memory. He was haunted by reality, and reality was cruel. She hated him. Or maybe worse. Maybe she felt nothing. Alexander exhaled slowly. No, that wasn't true. He saw it in her eyes. She felt something. Pain, anger, hurt. Which meant one thing. The past wasn't buried. Not for either of them. Across the ballroom, Simone fought to steady herself. Her hands trembled slightly. Her assistant noticed. Simone? Are you okay? Simone forced a breath. Yes. But she wasn't. Not even close. Because seeing Alexander again had reopened wounds she thought had healed. Wounds she had buried beneath success, beneath ambition, beneath survival. Tonight was supposed to be about her future. Instead, her past had walked right through the door. And it came wearing an expensive suit and carrying 10 years of unfinished pain. At the podium, the announcer's voice echoed. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Alexander Whitmore. Applause filled the room. Alexander walked toward the stage. Controlled again, the billionaire mask back in place. But inside, everything was unraveling. As he reached the podium, his eyes searched the crowd and found her instantly. Simone, standing at the back, watching, guarded, distant, untouchable. Alexander gripped the podium. His prepared speech sat in front of him. But the words blurred, because tonight had already changed everything. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. Before we continue, I want to hear from you. If someone you deeply loved disappeared from your life without explanation, and suddenly returned 10 years later, would you hear them out? Or would you walk away for good? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson for more powerful stories like this. Alexander stood at the podium. The applause slowly faded. Hundreds of eyes were on him. Investors, executives, the press, New York's elite. To everyone in the room, Alexander Whitmore looked exactly as he always did. Calm, powerful, controlled. A billionaire who never cracked under pressure. But tonight, that image was hanging by a thread, because standing near the back of the ballroom was the one person who could unravel him with a single look. Simone. Alexander's eyes found her again. She stood still, professional, composed, but he knew her. Or at least, he used to. And he knew that calm exterior was hiding something much deeper. Pain, anger, unanswered questions. Questions he had caused. Alexander forced himself back to the present. He adjusted the microphone. Good evening, everyone. His voice carried across the room. Steady, controlled. You'd never know the storm inside him. It's an honor to welcome all of you tonight. As he spoke, his mouth moved through the prepared speech, but his mind drifted back 10 years, to a time before the billions, before power, before success, back to when life was simpler, back to when happiness had a name. Simone Carter, 10 years earlier. Brooklyn. It was raining. Alexander sat inside a small neighborhood coffee shop, frustrated as he stared at his laptop. The screen reflected bad news. Again, another investor. Rejection. Another polite email. Another no. His startup was bleeding money. Bills were piling up. The pressure was crushing. At 28, Alexander was brilliant, driven, hungry. But ambition didn't pay rent. Not yet. He rubbed his face. Exhausted, defeated. Then a warm voice interrupted his thoughts. You've been glaring at that laptop for 20 minutes. Alexander looked up, and everything changed. She stood there, holding a coffee mug. Beautiful, confident, bright-eyed. Her smile carried warmth that somehow cut through the storm outside. Simone Carter, 24. Funny, sharp, full of life. Alexander stared, a second too long. Simone smiled. That bad? Alexander exhaled. You have no idea. She glanced at the screen. Startup problems? He raised an eyebrow. You can tell? She laughed softly. You've got the exact expression of someone deciding whether to chase a dream or throw a laptop through a wall. Despite himself, Alexander laughed. For the first time all day, Simone smiled wider. There it is. What? A human reaction. Alexander shook his head. You always talk to strangers like this? She shrugged playfully. Only the grumpy ones. That was how it started. Unexpectedly. Simply, naturally. A random conversation on a rainy afternoon. Neither of them knew then that one moment, one conversation, would change both their lives. Back then, Alexander had very little. A small apartment, a struggling startup, big dreams, too much pressure. Simone, meanwhile, worked as an assistant coordinator at an event company. She was building her own dreams too. Slowly, patiently, she wanted more. Not fame, not wealth. Freedom. Purpose. A life she could be proud of. They understood each other. Both ambitious, both hard-working, both fighting for something bigger. And somehow, they fit perfectly. The weeks after that coffee shop meeting felt effortless. Conversations became dinners. Dinners became late-night walks. Walks became something deeper, something real. With Simone, Alexander felt peace. Something rare. She saw him beyond ambition, beyond business, beyond success. She saw the man behind the dream. And she loved him there. One night, they sat on the rooftop of Alexander's apartment building. City lights stretched endlessly around them. Simone leaned beside him, comfortable, warm, safe. Alexander looked at her. You know what scares me? Simone smiled. That's new. He chuckled softly. I'm serious. She turned toward him. What? Alexander stared at the skyline. Failure. The word hung there. Heavy. Raw. Simone listened. He continued quietly. I'm terrified of failing. She didn't interrupt. I've spent my whole life trying to prove myself. His voice lowered. To my father, to the world, to myself. Simone studied him. You know what I think? Alexander glanced at her. She smiled gently. I think you're carrying too much alone. That hit something deep. Alexander looked away. Simone reached for his hand. Softly, warmly. You don't always have to be strong, Alex. He looked at her again. There it was. The thing that scared him most. Not failure. Vulnerability. Because Simone had become the one person who could see through every wall he built. And somehow, she made him feel safe. That terrified him. Because love had quietly become essential, necessary, dangerous. Simone squeezed his hand. "You're going to make it." Alexander frowned slightly. "You sound sure." She smiled. "I am." "Why?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because you don't quit." Alexander stared at her. His chest tightened. Not from fear. From love. Pure and undeniable. That was the night he realized it. He loved her. Completely. Deeply. Irreversibly. And for the first time in years, the future didn't feel so heavy. Because now, when he imagined success, he imagined her beside him. Always. Back in the present, applause suddenly erupted. Alexander blinked. The sound pulled him back to reality. His speech was ending. Autopilot had carried him through most of it. But his mind remained trapped in memory. Because remembering the beginning made one truth painfully clear. He hadn't just lost Simone. He lost the best version of himself. The version that knew how to love. And tonight, that loss stood in the same room with him. Love didn't disappear overnight. It rarely does. Sometimes, relationships don't break because love is gone. They break because pressure becomes louder than love. And for Alexander and Simone, pressure was coming from every direction. At first, life felt beautiful, simple. The kind of love people dream about. They supported each other, protected each other, built each other up. Simone became Alexander's peace. And Alexander became Simone's safe place. For nearly 2 years, they built something real. Something strong. Something worth fighting for. But life doesn't always wait for people to feel ready. And soon, reality came knocking. Hard. Alexander's startup entered its worst season. Investors pulled out. Revenue dropped. Cash flow collapsed. Deadlines piled up. Bills multiplied. The pressure was relentless. Every day brought new problems, new stress, new fear. Alexander worked longer hours, slept less, talked less, smiled less. Simone noticed everything. She always did. One evening, Simone arrived at Alexander's apartment, carrying takeout. She used her spare key and stepped inside. The apartment was dark except for laptop screens. Alexander sat at his desk, still working. Again, she checked the clock. 9:47 p.m. Simone frowned. "Have you eaten?" She walked closer. "Alex?" Alexander finally looked up. Exhausted. Drained. His eyes carried a fatigue she hadn't seen before. "Hey," Simone softened. "You forgot dinner again." Alexander rubbed his temples. "I'm not hungry." Simone set the food down. "You said that yesterday." He exhaled sharply. "Simone, not now." She paused. The irritation in his voice stung. Still, she kept calm. "I'm worried about you." Alexander's jaw tightened. "I said, I'm fine." Simone crossed her arms. "No, you're not." Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Alexander looked away. Simone stepped closer. "Talk to me." His voice dropped. "I don't want to talk." "Alex." I said, "Not now." The sharpness in his voice cut through the room. Simone froze. That hurt. Alexander saw it immediately. Regret flashed across his face, but stress spoke louder than love. Again, Simone inhaled slowly. "What's happening to us?" The question landed heavily. Alexander remained silent. Simone's voice softened. "You're shutting me out." Still silence. Simone felt frustration rising. "This is exactly what you do." Alexander frowned. "What does that mean?" "You carry everything alone." Her voice shook now. "You shut down. You push people away." Alexander stood. Defensive. Tired. Cornered. "You think I want this?" Simone met his gaze. "No. But you're doing it anyway." His frustration exploded. "Because everything is falling apart." The words echoed through the apartment. Simone stared at him. Alexander ran a hand through his hair. Breathing hard. Emotion cracking through. "The company is bleeding money." Silence. He continued. "I've got employees depending on me. Investors losing confidence. Bills stacking up." His voice lowered. "And every day feels like I'm one step away from losing everything." The raw honesty shifted the atmosphere. Simone's anger softened instantly. She moved closer. Gentler now. "Then let me help." Alexander laughed bitterly. "How?" "By being here." She looked directly into his eyes. "You don't have to carry this alone." Alexander's expression hardened again. Because that was the problem. He didn't know how to let someone carry pain with him. Especially not Simone. Especially not when he felt himself slipping. His fear wasn't just failure anymore. It was failing in front of her, looking weak in front of her, becoming a burden to her. And those fears ran deeper than Simone understood, because they were tied to something older, something darker. His father, Richard Whitmore, a man who measured worth through success. Nothing else. No weakness, no softness, no excuses. Alexander had grown up learning one brutal lesson: win, or become irrelevant. That mindset shaped him, built him, and damaged him. A few days later, the pressure got worse. Alexander received a call from his father. He almost didn't answer. But he did. Richard's cold voice filled the line. "I heard about the investors." Alexander's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" A pause. Then, "The same thing I've always wanted." Alexander already hated where this was going. Richard continued. "You're distracted." Silence. Alexander said nothing. Then came the words that changed everything. "This relationship is making you weak." Alexander's expression darkened. "Don't." But Richard continued anyway. "That woman is a distraction." Alexander's voice sharpened. "Don't talk about Simone." His father ignored him. "You're making emotional decisions." Alexander gripped the phone harder. "She has nothing to do with this." Richard laughed coldly. "She has everything to do with this." Then, the final blow. "If you want to build something great, sacrifices must be made." Silence. Cold. Heavy. Richard delivered the words like a verdict. "You cannot build an empire while carrying emotional baggage." Alexander's breathing slowed. Dangerously. His father's voice dropped. "You need to decide what matters more, success or her." The call ended, but the damage remained. That night, Alexander sat alone in darkness. Simone had called 3 times. He ignored every call. His father's words kept replaying, over and over. Success or her. Success or her. The cruel part? He knew the choice should have been easy. He loved Simone. He wanted Simone. But fear had a way of twisting truth, and Alexander was drowning in fear. Fear of failure. Fear of losing everything. Fear of dragging Simone into the collapse. He convinced himself of something dangerous. That leaving would protect her. That cutting her loose now would save her future. That she deserved better than the chaos surrounding him. But deep down, that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was uglier. Part of him was afraid she'd leave anyway once everything collapsed. And rejection scared him more than loneliness. So instead of risking being abandoned, he began considering something far worse. Walking away first, making the choice himself, before life made it for him. And that single thought would soon destroy everything. Sometimes relationships don't collapse in one dramatic moment. Sometimes they slowly crack. Tiny fracture by tiny fracture. A missed call. An ignored message. A conversation avoided. A truth left unsaid. And before anyone realizes it, the distance becomes enormous. That was exactly what happened to Alexander and Simone. After the call with his father, something shifted inside Alexander. Fear became louder, doubt became stronger, and the walls around him grew higher. Simone noticed it immediately. He was becoming harder to reach, physically present, emotionally absent. It scared her, because no matter how much she loved him, she couldn't fight walls she wasn't allowed through. The following week was worse. Alexander barely returned calls. Texts became shorter. Conversations became colder. Every interaction felt strained, forced. Simone sat on her couch late one evening staring at her phone. 3 unanswered messages. 2 missed calls. Nothing. Her chest tightened. This wasn't normal. This wasn't them. She replayed recent weeks in her mind. The stress, the distance, the silence. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Her best friend, Danielle, sat beside her. Danielle frowned. "I don't like this." Simone sighed. "Neither do I." Danielle looked at her carefully. "Have you asked him directly?" Simone laughed bitterly. "When do I ask? He barely speaks to me now." Danielle stayed quiet. Then, "You think he's seeing someone else?" Simone's head snapped up. "No." The answer came instantly. Firmly. She shook her head. "No, it's not that." Danielle studied her. "You sound sure." Simone nodded slowly. "I know Alexander." Her voice softened. "He's hurting." Danielle frowned. "Then why push you away?" Simone looked down. "That's what I don't understand." The truth was, Simone wasn't angry yet. Not really. She was scared. Because silence creates dangerous questions. And unanswered questions create fear. The next morning, Simone made a decision. Enough waiting. Enough guessing. She was going to see him. In person. No excuses. No delays. She arrived at Alexander's office building just before noon. A towering glass skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. Cold, impressive, intimidating. Very Alexander. The receptionist recognized her immediately. Ms. Carter. Simone gave a small smile. Hi, is Alexander available? The receptionist hesitated. That tiny hesitation made Simone's stomach drop. Ms. Carter. Something felt wrong instantly. Simone's expression tightened. What is it? The receptionist shifted awkwardly. Mr. Whitmore instructed us not to allow unscheduled visitors. Silence. Simone stared, not understanding. What? The receptionist looked uncomfortable. I'm sorry. Simone's chest tightened. There had to be some mistake. No. This had to be a misunderstanding. Tell him Simone is here. The receptionist hesitated again, then made the call. Simone waited, heart pounding. Seconds felt endless. The receptionist slowly lowered the phone. Her expression said everything before words came. Mr. Whitmore says, he's unavailable. The words hit like a slap. Simone stood frozen. The room suddenly felt too cold, too quiet, too unreal. Unavailable? For her? No. Something was deeply wrong. This wasn't Alexander. Or maybe it was. And she had never seen this side before. Simone forced herself to breathe. Did he say anything else? The receptionist looked apologetic. No, ma'am. Nothing. No explanation. No message. Nothing. Pain crept into Simone's chest, followed by something else. Anger. Sharp and rising. She nodded once. Tight. Controlled. Thank you. Then she turned and walked away. But the second she stepped outside, her composure cracked. What was happening? What was he doing? Why was he shutting her out like this? She called him immediately. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Simone lowered the phone slowly. Hurt spread through her like fire. Now fear was turning into something else. Frustration, confusion, and betrayal. Across town, inside his office, Alexander stood by the window. Phone in hand. Unread messages on screen. Simone. Again. His jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to call her back. To fix this. To explain. To stop this before it went too far. But fear kept winning. Fear whispered the same lie. This is for the best. End it now. Before things get worse. Before you destroy her. Before she sees you fail. Alexander closed his eyes. This felt wrong. Everything about it felt wrong. Because deep down, he knew the truth. He wasn't protecting Simone. He was protecting himself. Protecting himself from vulnerability, from failure, from being seen at his weakest. And that cowardice was disguised as sacrifice. But he wasn't ready to admit that yet. His phone buzzed again. Simone calling. Alexander stared at the screen. His thumb hovered. Answer. Explain. Fight for her. Instead, he silenced the phone. And with that one action, the distance between them became even greater. A distance neither of them fully understood yet. But soon, that distance would become devastating. By evening, Simone had reached her limit. Confusion had turned into frustration. Frustration had turned into pain. And pain was quickly becoming unbearable. She sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone. No messages, no explanation, nothing. The silence was cruel. It felt deliberate now, intentional, and that hurt even more. Simone replayed every recent moment in her head. The late nights, the cold responses, the distance, the office rejection. None of it made sense. Unless a terrible thought entered her mind. Maybe Alexander didn't want this anymore. Maybe he had already checked out emotionally. Maybe she was the only one still fighting. The thought shattered something inside her. No, she refused to accept silence as an answer. If Alexander wanted to end things, he would say it to her face. He owed her that much. At least she thought he did. Then her phone vibrated. Her breath caught. Alexander. Finally, she answered instantly. Alexander. Silence. Then his voice. Low. Controlled. Cold. Come over. Just 2 words. No warmth. No explanation. Simone's chest tightened. I'm coming. The call ended. 25 minutes later, Simone stood outside Alexander's apartment. Her heart pounded violently. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. She knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened. Alexander stood there. But he looked different. Cold. Emotionally distant. Like a stranger wearing Alexander's face. Simone stepped inside. The silence between them felt suffocating. She turned to face him. What is happening? Alexander said nothing. That silence ignited her anger. No, she shook her head. No more silence. Her voice cracked. You don't get to shut me out and pretend everything is fine. Still silence. Simone stared at him in disbelief. Tears burned behind her eyes. What did I do? That landed. Alexander's jaw tightened. She stepped closer. Voice breaking. Tell me what I did wrong. His chest tightened painfully. Because she had done nothing wrong. Nothing. She was the best thing that had ever happened to him. And he was about to destroy that. Simone searched his face desperately. Talk to me. Alexander finally spoke. The words came out cold. Deliberately cold. Because warmth would break him. We need to end this. Silence. The room stopped breathing. Simone blinked, not understanding. What? Alexander forced himself to stay detached. This relationship is over. The words hit like violence. Simone stared at him. Frozen. No. No. This wasn't real. Her voice dropped to a whisper. What are you saying? Alexander looked away. He couldn't look directly at her. Not, and survive this. I'm done. 3 words. Brutal. Cruel. Deadly. Simone felt the ground disappear beneath her. Done? Just like that? After everything? Her voice shook violently now. Done? She laughed in disbelief. Broken. Shattered. You're done? Tears finally spilled. Alexander heard every crack in her voice. Every fracture. Every wound opening in real time. It was killing him. But he kept going. Because he believed pain now would save her later. Coward. 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 A voice inside screamed the truth. But he ignored it. Simone stared at him with pure devastation. No. She shook her head. No. I don't believe this. She moved closer. Desperate. Searching his face. This isn't you. Alexander's voice hardened. It is. No. Her tears fell faster now. You love me. Silence. Pain. Exploded inside Alexander's chest. Because, yes, he loved her. More than anything. But love and fear were at war. And fear was winning. Simone grabbed his arm. Look at me. Alexander slowly looked at her. And what he saw nearly broke him. Pure heartbreak. Pure confusion. Pure pain. Simone's voice shattered. Tell me the truth. She searched his eyes. Do you love me? The question destroyed him. Because one honest answer would ruin everything. Or save everything. He stood at the edge of a choice. Fight for love. Or surrender to fear. And Alexander chose fear. His voice came out cold. Sharp. Final. No. One word. That was all. But it destroyed her. Completely. Simone recoiled as if physically struck. The pain in her face was unbearable. Alexander nearly broke. Nearly took it back. Nearly pulled her into his arms and told her everything. But pride. Fear. Cowardice. Won. Simone's tears fell silently now. She stared at him like she no longer recognized him. And maybe she didn't. Because the man in front of her wasn't the man she loved. That man had disappeared. Or maybe he had buried himself. Her voice was barely audible. So everything was a lie? Alexander clenched his fists. Every instinct screamed to say no. To stop this. But he stayed silent. Simone laughed bitterly through tears. The sound broke something inside him. Wow. She wiped her face, shaking. You know what hurts most? Alexander couldn't breathe. Simone looked directly into his soul. That I would have stood beside you through anything. The truth in those words crushed him. She continued. I would have fought for you. Tears streamed freely. But you never gave me the chance. Silence. Heavy. Unforgiving. Then came the final wound. Simone's voice turned cold. Not loud. Not angry. Just broken. I hope whatever you're running from was worth losing someone who truly loved you. Alexander closed his eyes. Because that sentence would haunt him for years. Simone moved toward the door, stopped, but didn't turn around. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter, but somehow even more painful. One day, a pause. You'll understand what you threw away tonight. Then she walked out, and this time, she didn't look back. The door closed. Silence consumed the apartment. Alexander stood frozen, not moving, not breathing. Then it hit. The full weight of what he had done. His legs gave out. He dropped to the floor, hands trembling, breathing uneven, broken. The mask shattered, and for the first time in years, Alexander cried, because he finally understood the truth. He hadn't protected Simone. He had destroyed her, and destroyed himself in the process. All because of one choice. One terrible choice. Fear over love. Silence over honesty. Cowardice over courage. And that choice would haunt both of them. For the next 10 years. The applause inside the ballroom faded as Alexander stepped away from the podium. His speech was over. But his mind wasn't on the investors, or the press, or the event. It was on one person, Simone. Every memory from 10 years ago still burned fresh in his mind. Every cruel word, every lie, every tear in her eyes, every second of that night haunted him. And now, fate had done something cruel. It placed the woman he broke directly in front of him again. Not for a passing moment, not for a brief encounter, but for an entire night, and possibly beyond. As guests rose for cocktails and networking, the ballroom buzzed with life. Laughter filled the air. Glasses clinked. Conversations flowed. Luxury and elegance surrounded everyone. But beneath the glamour, two people were silently drowning in unfinished pain. Across the room, Simone was reviewing final dinner arrangements with her team. Professional, focused, efficient, at least on the outside. Inside, chaos. Seeing Alexander again had shaken her far more than she wanted to admit. She hated that. Hated that even after 10 years, he still had the power to affect her. She thought she was healed. She thought she had moved on. She thought the pain had faded. But pain buried is not pain erased. And tonight had proven that. Some wounds don't disappear. They simply go quiet, until something reopens them. Her assistant approached. Dinner service begins in 15 minutes. Simone nodded. Good. Keep table 6 updated on timing. Got it. The assistant hesitated, then lowered her voice. Are you okay? Simone looked up. Her expression remained calm. Why does everyone keep asking me that? Her assistant offered a careful smile. Because you look like you're fighting something. Simone exhaled slowly. She glanced away. Maybe she was. Maybe tonight wasn't just testing her professionally. Maybe life was forcing her to confront something she thought she left behind. Before she could answer, a familiar voice interrupted. Miss Carter. Every muscle in Simone's body stiffened. She didn't need to turn around. She knew that voice. Alexander. Of course. She slowly turned. There he stood again. Perfect suit. Perfect posture. Perfect billionaire composure. But Simone now saw through that image. She knew what lived behind those controlled eyes. Regret. Guilt. Pain. Good. He deserved to feel all of it. Her assistant sensed the tension instantly. I'll check on table 6. And quickly disappeared. Now, they were alone again. Alexander kept a respectful distance. No sudden moves. No pressure. Just cautious space. Simone folded her arms. Professional mask back on. Yes, Mr. Whitmore. The formal title again. A deliberate reminder. You no longer matter to me. Alexander felt it. Every time. Still, he stayed calm. There's a change to the dinner schedule. Simone blinked. Business? That surprised her. She reached for her tablet. What change? Alexander spoke carefully. The board wants to move the investor session earlier. Simone frowned. That creates a timing conflict with the keynote panel. Alexander nodded. I know. Simone's mind immediately shifted into work mode. She reviewed the schedule, calculating, problem-solving, focused. Alexander watched quietly, and for a moment, it felt familiar. Watching her work, watching her think. Simone had always been remarkable, even years ago. Sharp, efficient. Brilliant under pressure. That hadn't changed. She looked up. There's only one solution. Alexander met her gaze. Simone continued. We shift the keynote by 20 minutes and move dinner service in phases. Alexander nodded. That works. Simone adjusted notes. Fine. I'll handle it. She moved to leave. Alexander spoke again. Simone. She stopped, annoyance rising instantly. Not because of his voice. Because part of her still reacted to it. And she hated that. She turned slowly. What? Alexander held her gaze. No masks now. Just raw honesty. I'm sorry. The words landed like a stone between them. Simone stared, then laughed. A cold laugh. Unamused. Disbelieving. You're sorry? Alexander stayed silent. Simone stepped closer. Voice low. Sharp. Sorry for what? Silence. Her anger rose. No, he didn't get to do this. Not with one simple apology. Not after 10 years. Not after what he did. She stared directly into his eyes. Sorry for disappearing. A pause. Sorry for lying. Another step closer. Sorry for looking me in the eyes and telling me you didn't love me. Every word hit him hard. Deserved. Simone's voice trembled now. Not from weakness. From contained pain. You don't get to walk back into my life and fix 10 years with 2 words. Alexander's jaw tightened. He accepted every word. Because she was right. Completely right. Simone shook her head. Eyes glistening again. Anger and hurt colliding. You know what's funny? Her voice cracked. For years I blamed myself. Alexander's chest tightened painfully. She continued. I kept asking what I did wrong. Tears threatened again. But she fought them. I replayed everything. Every conversation, every memory, every moment, trying to figure out where I failed. Alexander's breathing slowed. Pain spread heavily through his chest. Because this was the consequence. Not just losing her, but knowing what his silence had done to her. Simone's eyes locked onto his. Burning. You broke something in me. Silence. Heavy. Painful. Real. Alexander had no defense. No words. No excuse. Only truth. And truth was ugly. He had destroyed the best thing in his life. All because he was too afraid to choose courage. And standing here now, he realized something even worse. Simone may have survived him. She may have rebuilt herself. But the damage he caused had never fully disappeared. And that truth hurt more than any punishment ever could. Simone's words lingered heavily in the air. You broke something in me. Alexander stood motionless. That sentence cut deeper than anything she had said all night. Not because it was cruel, because it was true, painfully true, and no amount of success, money, or power could erase that. Around them, the gala continued as if nothing had changed. Guests laughed. Music played softly. Servers moved gracefully between tables. But in this small corner of the ballroom, the atmosphere felt suffocating, heavy with years of buried pain. Alexander looked at Simone, really looked at her. At the strength she had built, at the walls she had raised, at the pain still hidden behind her calm exterior. And for the first time in years, he stopped trying to protect himself. His voice came low, unsteady. You did nothing wrong. Simone froze. Her brows furrowed. Alexander swallowed hard. You were never the problem. The words shook something inside her. No, she didn't want this. Didn't want explanations now. Didn't want truths arriving 10 years too late. Still, her heart listened. Against her will. Alexander continued. His voice rough now. Raw. I lied to you. Simone's jaw tightened. That much she already knew. He exhaled slowly. The night I ended things. His throat tightened. I was terrified. Simone stared. Confused. Angry. Unmoved. Alexander forced himself forward. My company was collapsing. Simone remained silent. He continued. Investors were pulling out. Debt was rising. Everything I had built was falling apart. His hands clenched slightly. And I was drowning. Simone's expression shifted slightly. Only slightly. But she said nothing. Alexander looked down. Ashamed. My father knew. Simone frowned. Richard Whitmore. She remembered him. Cold. Intimidating. Calculating. The man who never liked her. Alexander continued. He told me you were a distraction. Simone's expression darkened. Anger flickered. Alexander laughed bitterly. He said I had to choose. His voice cracked slightly. Success or you. Silence. Simone's breathing slowed. The room suddenly felt still. Alexander shook his head. I wish I could blame him. He looked up, eyes full of regret. But I can't. Simone held his gaze. Alexander's next words came painfully. Because he didn't force me. Silence. Heavy. I made the choice. The truth landed hard. Raw. Ugly. Honest. Alexander's voice dropped further. I chose fear. Those 3 words hit differently. Because they carried no excuses. No justifications. Only accountability. Simone stared at him. Her emotions churned violently. Anger. Pain. Confusion. And something more dangerous. Understanding. Alexander continued. I convinced myself leaving would protect you. His laugh held no humor. I told myself you deserved better. He shook his head slowly. That was a lie too. Simone's eyes narrowed slightly. Alexander looked directly at her. The final mask gone. Complete vulnerability now. I wasn't protecting you. A pause. He swallowed hard. I was protecting myself. The honesty stunned Simone. Because this sounded real, ugly, messy, human. Alexander's voice trembled. I was scared you'd watch me fail. He stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough for honesty to feel real. I was scared you'd see me broken. Another breath. Another painful truth. And part of me was terrified that once everything collapsed. His voice cracked. You'd leave too. Silence. Simone's chest tightened. For the first time tonight, her anger wavered. Not disappeared, but shifted. Because now she saw something clearly. Alexander hadn't left because he stopped loving her. He left because fear consumed him. Fear had made him cruel. Fear had made him selfish. Fear had made him destructive. Simone's voice came quietly. So instead, a pause. Tears returned. You abandoned me first. The words struck hard. Alexander closed his eyes briefly. Yes, one word. No defense. No denial. Just truth. Simone's tears fell now. Slow. Painful. Years of confusion colliding with painful clarity. Her voice broke. You should have trusted me. Alexander opened his eyes, filled with regret. I know. She shook her head, emotion pouring out now. I loved you. Her voice cracked. I would have stayed. Alexander felt his chest tighten painfully. Because he knew. Now he knew. She would have stayed. She would have fought beside him. And that truth made his choice even more tragic. Simone wiped her tears angrily. Frustration rising again. Do you understand what your silence did to me? Alexander stayed silent. She continued, voice trembling. It made me question my worth. Pain flashed across her face. It made me question whether I was lovable. Alexander felt sick. Simone looked away. Her next words came softer, more broken. For years I struggled to trust anyone. That confession crushed him, because the consequences of his decision had lasted far beyond that night. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was damage. Deep emotional damage. Simone inhaled shakily, then looked back at him. One question remained. The biggest one. The question buried beneath everything else. Her voice dropped. Quiet. Dangerous. If you loved me. A pause. Then, why are you here now? Silence. Alexander froze. Because this question led to the one truth he had not yet revealed. The deepest truth. The secret he had buried for years. And once he said it, nothing between them would ever be the same again. Simone's question hung heavily between them. If you loved me, why are you here now? Alexander stood frozen, because the answer wasn't simple. And the truth was far more complicated than Simone could imagine. He held her gaze, years of guilt pressing heavily on his chest. This was it. The moment everything changed. His voice came low, careful, raw. Because I never really left. Simone frowned. Confusion crossed her face. What does that mean? Alexander exhaled slowly. There was no easy way to say this, no version of this truth that wouldn't hurt. Still, she deserved honesty. Finally, complete honesty. He looked directly at her. After you walked out that night, his voice tightened. I told myself it was over. A pause. I told myself I made the right decision. Simone remained silent, watching, waiting. Alexander continued, but I couldn't let go. His jaw tightened, not emotionally, not mentally. His voice dropped further. Not even physically. Simone's expression shifted. Slightly. She didn't understand yet. Alexander swallowed hard. I tried to move on. He laughed bitterly. I failed. The words came out painfully honest. No matter how much time passed, I couldn't stop thinking about you. Simone's heartbeat quickened. She hated where this was going. Hated the strange tension building in her chest. Alexander kept going. His words now carried visible shame. So I started checking on you. Silence. Simone frowned. What? Alexander's voice dropped. At first, it was small. His gaze lowered. A social media update. A mutual connection. A quick search. Just enough to know you were okay. Simone's expression hardened. Something dangerous flickered in her eyes. Alexander noticed, but he kept talking. Then your business started. Silence. His next words changed everything. I knew when your first company nearly failed. Simone froze. No. Alexander's voice felt heavier now. Painfully heavy. I knew when you lost your first major client. Her breathing slowed. A strange coldness spread through her chest. No. No. Alexander looked at her. Full regret. I knew when you struggled to pay your employees. Simone stared, shock flooding her face. Her voice came barely above a whisper. How? Alexander's silence lasted too long. Then, I helped. 3 words. The room went dead silent. Simone's eyes widened. Disbelief, shock, confusion. What? Alexander continued, because stopping now was impossible. I made calls. His voice shook slightly. I created opportunities. Simone stood completely still, unable to process. Alexander kept speaking, every word feeling heavier. I connected investors to your company. Another pause. I made sure contracts found you. Simone's face drained of color. No, no way. Alexander's voice dropped. Anonymous referrals. Silence. Financial backing through third parties. Silence. Emergency support. When things got bad, the truth exploded between them. Simone stared at him. completely stunned. Her mind raced. Flashbacks flooded in. The mysterious investor who saved her company. The unexpected referrals. The contracts that came from nowhere. The opportunities she never fully understood. No. No, no. Her voice trembled. That was you? Alexander said nothing. He didn't need to. His silence confirmed everything. Simone stepped back slowly, as if the ground beneath her had shifted. Her heart pounded violently. Shock was rapidly becoming something else. Something darker. Something sharper. Anger. Her voice shook. You watched me? Alexander's chest tightened. Simone? Her voice rose. You watched me struggle. Alexander stepped forward slightly. I wanted to help. That was the wrong thing to say. Simone's expression changed instantly. Shock disappeared. Anger exploded. Pure, raw, fierce. You wanted to help? She laughed in disbelief. A broken laugh. Disgusted. Angry. Help? She stared at him, like she no longer knew who he was. Her voice rose. You shattered my heart. Tears filled her eyes again. You disappeared. Another step back. And then, you watched my life from the shadows. Alexander's jaw tightened, regret flooding through him. Simone shook her head violently. No. Her breathing grew uneven. No. This is insane. She pointed at him. You don't get to call that love. Her voice cracked. That feels like control. The accusation hit hard, because deep down, Alexander feared she would see it exactly this way. Simone's anger poured out now. Years of pain colliding with fresh betrayal. You watched me rebuild myself. Tears streamed freely. You watched me suffer. Her voice shattered. And you said nothing? Silence. Alexander had no defense, because every word she said carried truth. Simone's expression hardened. The hurt in her eyes had transformed into fury. You had years to tell me the truth. A pause. Years. But instead, you hid in the shadows. Her voice lowered. Dangerously calm now. And somehow, that was worse. Do you understand how disturbing that sounds? Alexander felt his chest tighten. Because now, he saw it. Really saw it. Not through guilt. Not through regret. Through her eyes. What he thought was love, what he thought was protection, had become something deeply damaging. Something painful. Something unfair. Simone wiped her tears angrily. Her voice turned cold. Ice cold. I need space. Alexander froze. Simone? No. Her voice cut sharply. She looked directly into his eyes. No softness. No warmth. Nothing. Don't. Silence. Simone's final words hit hard. You don't get to decide what's best for me anymore. Then she turned and walked away, leaving Alexander standing there, alone. Again, only this time, he finally understood something brutal. Love without honesty can become destructive, even when intentions are good. And tonight, his deepest secret had done exactly what he feared. It pushed Simone even further away. Simone walked quickly through the ballroom, her breathing uneven, her mind spinning. Everything around her became noise. Blurred voices, soft music, clinking glasses. None of it felt real. All she could hear was Alexander's confession repeating in her mind. I never really left. The words haunted her. Not because they sounded romantic, because they felt disturbing, painful, confusing. Her heels clicked rapidly against the polished floor as she headed toward the private hallway near the service entrance. She needed air, space, distance, anything away from him. The second she reached the empty hallway, her composure shattered. She stopped, hands trembling, breathing hard. Tears burned hot down her face. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. No, no, no. This couldn't be real. For years, Simone had built a story in her mind. Alexander left. Alexander moved on. Alexander forgot her. Painful, but clean. Simple, final. That story had helped her heal, helped her survive, helped her move forward. But tonight, everything she believed had been shattered. He never forgot. He never moved on. He watched, quietly, silently, from the shadows. Her stomach twisted. She thought about every unexplained opportunity, every miracle, every lucky break. The investor who saved her first business crisis. The referrals that came at impossible moments. The contracts that appeared just when everything seemed lost. All of it. Alexander. The realization made her feel sick. Not grateful. Not relieved. Violated. Because choice mattered. Truth mattered. And Alexander had taken both away from her. Her assistant found her moments later. Simone? Simone quickly wiped her face. But it was too late. Her assistant's expression changed instantly. concern, alarm. Oh my God. She moved closer. What happened? Simone tried to speak. Failed. The words refused to come. Her assistant lowered her voice. Did something happen with Whitmore? That name broke the final wall. Simone let out a shaky breath. Then, another. Her voice came barely above a whisper. He's the reason. Her assistant frowned. The reason for what? Simone laughed bitterly through tears. For everything. Confusion deepened. Simone shook her head. You wouldn't understand. And honestly, she wasn't sure she understood either. Because what hurt most wasn't just the secret. It was what the secret represented. Alexander still didn't understand love. Not really. He still thought he could control outcomes. Control pain. Control people's lives. All while hiding behind silence. Her assistant gently touched her arm. Do you want to go home? Simone closed her eyes. Part of her screamed, yes, leave, run, disappear. But another part refused. This event mattered. She had worked too hard. Sacrificed too much. She would not let Alexander Whitmore destroy this night too. Simone inhaled slowly, then straightened. No, she wasn't leaving. Not because of him. She wiped her face completely. Her breathing steadied. Her voice returned. Calmer, stronger. No. Her assistant studied her. You sure? Simone nodded. Yes. A pause. Then, I'm finishing this. Her assistant said nothing, but admiration flashed in her eyes. Because, despite everything, Simone was still standing, still fighting, still refusing to break. Back inside the ballroom, Alexander stood exactly where she left him. Frozen. His mind replaying every word Simone said. That feels like control. The accusation hit harder now, because the more he thought about it, the more he realized she was right. Painfully right. He had spent years convincing himself his actions came from love. Protection, care, loyalty. But love without honesty is dangerous. Love without trust becomes distorted. And, somewhere along the way, his love had become tangled with guilt, control, and fear. Alexander ran a hand over his face. Exhaustion hit him all at once. Not physical exhaustion, emotional collapse. Because for the first time, he saw himself clearly. Not as the man trying to protect Simone, but as the man who repeatedly took her choices away. First, when he ended the relationship without honesty. Then when he inserted himself into her life without permission. Different actions, same pattern, same flaw. Control. He hated that realization, because it forced him to confront something ugly. His greatest weakness had never been failure. It had always been fear. Fear disguised as logic. Fear disguised as sacrifice. Fear disguised as love. His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. Alexander. He turned. It was Marcus, his longtime friend and business partner. Marcus studied him. Concern clear in his expression. You look terrible. Alexander almost laughed. That obvious? Marcus folded his arms. What happened? Alexander hesitated, then exhaled. Simone. Marcus immediately understood. His expression shifted. Serious, now. She knows? Alexander nodded. She knows everything. Marcus stayed quiet, waiting. Alexander's voice dropped. She hates me. Marcus shook his head slowly. No. Alexander frowned. Marcus continued. If she hated you, she wouldn't feel this much. Silence. Alexander stared. Marcus stepped closer. She's hurt. A pause. Deeply hurt. Alexander looked away. I made everything worse. Marcus nodded. Yes. No sugarcoating. No false comfort. Just truth. Alexander respected that. Marcus continued. But maybe worse is necessary. Alexander frowned. Marcus held his gaze. Sometimes, things have to completely break before truth finally surfaces. Alexander exhaled slowly. The weight in his chest remained crushing. What do I do now? Marcus answered without hesitation. You stop trying to control the outcome. That landed hard. Marcus continued. No more fixing things with money. No more protecting her with secrets. No more deciding what's best for her. Silence. Then the simplest truth of all. You tell the truth. Alexander stared ahead. Marcus's words settled deeply. Because this time, truth meant everything. Not partial truth. Not convenient truth. All of it. Even the ugliest parts. Especially the ugliest parts. Marcus lowered his voice. If you really love her. A pause. Give her what you should have given her 10 years ago. Alexander looked at him. Marcus finished. The truth. The whole truth. And the choice. Choice. That word stayed with Alexander, because that was what he had stolen from Simone. Choice. The right to decide. The right to know. The right to choose her own path. And if he truly loved her, he had to give that back, even if it meant losing her forever. Across the ballroom, Simone slowly returned, composed again, professional again. But something inside her had changed. She wasn't just angry now. She was seeing everything differently. The man standing across the room wasn't simply the man who broke her heart. He was also a man deeply damaged by fear. A man whose greatest flaw was believing control could prevent pain. A dangerous flaw, one that had hurt them both. Their eyes met across the room. The air shifted instantly. Tension returned. Heavy, unavoidable. This story wasn't over, not even close. Because the biggest truth had still not been revealed. Pause right here. I really want your honest opinion. Do you think what Alexander did was romantic? Or was it wrong? If someone secretly watched over you for years, helped you from a distance, and never told you, would you see it as love? Or as control? Comment below. Love or control? The gala moved forward. On the surface, everything looked flawless. Guests laughed. Business deals were discussed. Wine flowed. Luxury surrounded every conversation. But beneath the polished surface, two hearts were carrying years of unresolved pain. Simone remained focused on work, at least externally. She moved through the ballroom with calm precision, checking schedules, managing staff, coordinating dinner service. Professional, efficient, untouchable. But internally, nothing was stable. Alexander's confession had shaken everything, not because it repaired anything. It didn't. But because it changed the story she had believed for 10 years. He hadn't stopped caring. He hadn't forgotten. That truth was messy, painful, complicated, and Simone hated complicated, especially when it involved him. She was reviewing the final keynote transition when a server approached. "Miss Carter." She looked up. "Yes?" The server handed her a folded note. "This was left for you." Simone frowned. She took it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Alexander. Her chest tightened instantly. She unfolded the note. Only one sentence. "Please, 5 minutes. No lies this time." Simone stared at the words. Emotion churned inside her. Annoyance, anger, curiosity, fear. She almost crumpled the note, almost ignored it. But the final words stayed with her. No lies this time. After several seconds, she exhaled, then made a decision. 5 minutes. That was all. Nothing more. A few minutes later, Simone stepped onto a quiet private terrace overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Cool night air met her skin. The city lights stretched endlessly below. Alexander stood near the railing, waiting, hands in pockets. Still, tense. The second he heard her heels, he turned. Their eyes met. Neither spoke immediately. Simone folded her arms. Cold, guarded. "You have 5 minutes." Alexander nodded slowly. "Fair. More than fair." He studied her for a moment, then spoke. "There's something else you need to know." Simone's expression didn't change. "Say it." Alexander inhaled deeply. This was harder than everything else, because this truth had never left him. Not once. Raw. The company didn't just struggle. A pause. It collapsed. Simone frowned slightly. Alexander continued. 3 months after I ended things with you. His jaw tightened. I lost everything. Simone's eyes narrowed. He held her gaze. Everything. Silence. Alexander's voice carried years of buried pain. The business failed. Investors pulled out. Debt exploded. My accounts were frozen. Simone stayed silent, listening. Alexander looked away briefly, ashamed, then continued. I hit rock bottom. His voice lowered. I lost the company. His throat tightened. My apartment. Another breath. My reputation. Simone's guarded expression softened slightly. Just slightly. Alexander's next words came painfully. And then, a pause. The hardest truth. My father cut me off completely. Simone froze. Alexander laughed bitterly. No humor. Only pain. He told me I failed. Silence. Then, he told me I proved him right. The night air felt heavier now. Simone could hear the damage in his voice. Years later, the pain still lived there. Alexander stared at the city, lost in memory. For nearly a year, his voice dropped. I disappeared. Simone frowned. What did that mean? Alexander answered before she asked. I lived out of cheap motels. Silence. I worked jobs no one knew about. Simone's eyes widened slightly. This wasn't the Alexander Whitmore the world knew. This was someone else entirely. Broken, humbled, alone. Alexander continued. I was drowning in debt. His voice cracked. Some days, I barely had enough to eat. Simone's breath caught. Shock spread through her, because she never knew, not even close. Alexander looked at her again. The billionaire mask gone. Nothing polished now. Nothing powerful. Only truth. Only scars. I wanted to call you. Simone's chest tightened. Alexander's voice trembled slightly. 1,000 times. A pause. But every time, his jaw clenched. I heard your voice in my head. She stared, confused. Alexander's eyes filled with raw regret. You said you would have stayed. Silence. He nodded slowly. I know. A painful breath. And that became the problem. Simone frowned. Alexander continued. Because I knew, if I called. His voice cracked fully now. You would come. Silence. Heavy. Real. Alexander swallowed hard. And I couldn't let you see me like that. Simone stared at him. Pain. Understanding. Frustration. Everything colliding. Alexander's next confession landed like a blow. So instead, a pause. I disappeared completely. The truth hung heavily between them. Years of silence. Years of suffering. Years of pride. All built on fear. Alexander exhaled slowly. His voice now barely above a whisper. I hated myself. Simone's chest tightened. He continued. For what I did to you. For what I became. For what I lost. The city lights reflected in his eyes. Years of buried guilt finally surfacing. Then he looked directly at her. The deepest truth, finally exposed. I didn't stay away because I stopped loving you. A pause. His voice broke. I stayed away because I believed you deserved better than the broken man I had become. Silence. The night felt still. Simone said nothing. But inside, everything was shifting. Because for the first time tonight, she wasn't just seeing the man who broke her. She was also seeing the broken man he became afterward. And that complicated everything. The terrace fell silent. Only the distant sounds of the city filled the air. Traffic, sirens, wind moving softly through the night. Simone stood frozen. Alexander's confession echoed in her mind. For years, she had imagined 100 different versions of his life after he left. In most of them, he moved on, succeeded, forgot her. She never imagined this. She never imagined that, after breaking her heart, he had fallen apart too. That he had lost everything. That he had suffered in silence, alone. Her emotions twisted painfully. Anger still lived inside her, deeply. But now, something else had entered. Compassion. And that scared her. Because compassion made things messy. Compassion weakened anger. And anger had protected her for years. Simone exhaled slowly, then finally spoke. Her voice came quiet, painfully calm. You should have told me. Alexander closed his eyes briefly. Because that sentence hurt more than anger, more than accusations, because it carried heartbreaking truth. When he opened his eyes again, Simone was staring directly at him. Tears glistened in her eyes. Not falling, just there. Heavy, painful. You should have trusted me enough to tell me. Alexander swallowed hard. I know. Simone shook her head, emotion slowly rising. You made every decision alone. Her voice trembled. Again, again and again. She stepped closer. Not aggressive, not soft, just honest. You decided I was better off without the truth. A pause. You decided I was better off without you. Another painful breath. You decided what I could handle. Alexander lowered his gaze. Because every word landed. Every word exposed the same flaw. Control. Fear. Silence. Simone's voice broke slightly. Do you understand how unfair that was? Alexander answered immediately. Yes. No hesitation. No defense. Only truth. Yes. The sincerity in his voice shook something inside her. Because this wasn't the Alexander she remembered. The old Alexander would have explained, defended, rationalized. Tonight, he was finally owning his choices. Fully. Simone wiped at her face, frustrated by the emotions slipping through. Her voice softened. Just a little. I would have stayed. The words came almost like a whisper, but they carried enormous weight. Alexander's chest tightened. Because, deep down, he always knew. Simone looked away briefly, then back at him. I loved you enough to struggle with you. Silence. She continued. I loved you enough to fight beside you. Her voice cracked. But you never gave me that chance. That truth hurt both of them. Because it was the tragedy at the center of everything. Not that life got hard. Not that Alexander failed. But that fear robbed them of choice. Robbed them of partnership. Robbed them of trust. Alexander's voice came low. Broken. I know. Simone laughed bitterly. A sad laugh. I hate that I still understand you. Alexander frowned slightly. Simone shook her head. That's the worst part. She crossed her arms tightly, trying to protect herself again. I understand your fear. A pause. I understand why you ran. Her eyes glistened. But understanding doesn't erase damage. The sentence landed heavily. Because it was true. Compassion did not erase consequences. Understanding did not erase pain. Alexander nodded slowly. I know. Simone studied him. Something had changed between them tonight. Not fixed, not healed, but shifted. The anger was still there. The hurt was still there. But now truth existed too. And truth changed things. Her voice came quieter. Why now? Alexander frowned. Simone clarified. Why tell me all this now? Silence. A strange look crossed Alexander's face. Something between vulnerability and fear. His jaw tightened. Because this question led to the final truth. The last truth, the one he had buried deepest. His voice lowered. There's one more thing. Simone immediately sensed it. The tension changed. Her heartbeat quickened. Alexander held her gaze. Raw, unprotected, completely exposed. His next words came carefully. I didn't expect to see you tonight. Simone frowned. That much is obvious. Alexander barely reacted. He continued. But if I hadn't... A pause. His voice dropped further. You still would have heard from me soon. Simone's brows furrowed. Confusion rose. What does that mean? Alexander's breathing slowed. His expression darkened. Heavy. Serious. Then he said the words that changed everything. I've been diagnosed with something. Silence. Simone froze. Every thought stopped. The air felt still. Cold. Heavy. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. What? Alexander looked at her. And for the first time all night, Simone saw fear. Real fear. Not fear of failure. Not fear of vulnerability. Something deeper. Something terrifying. Alexander swallowed hard, and the next truth waited at the edge of everything. Simone felt her entire body go still. The night air suddenly felt colder, heavier. Alexander's words echoed in her mind. I've been diagnosed with something. Her heartbeat quickened. 1,000 thoughts crashed through her mind. Fear, confusion, panic. She stared at him, searching his face, trying to understand what she was seeing. And then she realized it. The fear in Alexander's eyes wasn't familiar. This wasn't the fear of failure. This wasn't the fear of rejection. This was something deeper, something raw, something terrifying. Simone's voice came out barely above a whisper. Diagnosed with... What? Silence. Alexander struggled for words. For a man who controlled boardrooms and negotiated billion-dollar deals with ease, he had never felt this helpless, not even 10 years ago. Because this truth terrified him in ways nothing else ever had. He exhaled slowly, then finally spoke. A few months ago, I started having severe headaches. Simone listened, frozen. Alexander continued. At first, I ignored it. His expression darkened. I blamed stress, work, lack of sleep. A bitter laugh escaped him. I've spent years ignoring anything that felt uncomfortable. That truth landed heavily. Simone remained silent. Alexander looked away briefly, then continued. But the headaches got worse. Dizziness, blurred vision, blackouts. Simone's chest tightened. No. Alexander swallowed hard. So I got tested. The words felt painfully heavy. He forced himself to continue. Scans, blood work, neurological testing, silence. Then, they found a tumor. The world stopped. Simona stared. No sound came out. Nothing. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. A tumor? No, no, no. Alexander held her gaze. Pain visible now. Completely visible. His voice lowered. It's in my brain. The words shattered the silence. Simone physically recoiled. Shock flooded every part of her. Her hand flew to her mouth. Eyes wide. Tears instantly filling. No. The whisper escaped before she could stop it. Alexander's chest tightened painfully. Because this reaction hurt in ways he couldn't explain. Simone shook her head slowly. Disbelief. Fear. Pain. No. Alexander spoke gently. They caught it early. Simone's breathing turned uneven. That didn't help. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Her voice shook violently. Is it? She couldn't finish. Couldn't say the word. Alexander understood. His voice remained quiet. They don't know everything yet. Simone's heart dropped. Alexander continued. There's a surgery scheduled. Silence. Heavy. Real. Fear wrapped around them both. Alexander looked at her. No masks, no power, no billionaire image. Just a man facing something bigger than control. Something bigger than fear. Mortality. His voice broke slightly. The doctor told me something that wrecked me. Simone's eyes stayed locked on him. Alexander swallowed hard. He asked me one question. A pause. Then, if something happens during surgery, what unfinished business do you have? The words hit hard. Simone's chest tightened painfully. Alexander's eyes glistened. Raw emotion surfacing. And then came the deepest truth of all. I didn't need time to answer. Silence. His voice cracked. Because the answer was always you. Simone's tears fell freely now. She couldn't stop them. Couldn't control them. Everything inside her shattered. Alexander continued. For 10 years, I told myself silence was safer. His voice trembled. I told myself staying away protected you. A pause. Pain visible in every word. But when I heard that question, he exhaled shakily. I realized something. Simone stood frozen. Listening. Broken open. Alexander's next words came with devastating honesty. If my life ended tomorrow. A pause. The greatest regret of my life wouldn't be losing money. Wouldn't be failure. Wouldn't be everything I lost. His voice broke fully. It would be leaving you. Silence consumed the terrace. Simone cried openly now. Not because everything was fixed. Not because pain had disappeared. But because truth had finally arrived. Raw. Messy. Unfiltered. Alexander's voice softened. I was going to contact you. A painful breath. Not to ask for forgiveness. Not to fix the past. Not to make you love me again. His eyes locked onto hers. I just needed you to know the truth. Simone's heart felt like it might collapse. Because for the first time in 10 years, she saw everything clearly. The broken young man who ran from failure. The wounded man who lived with regret. And now, the terrified man standing before her, facing uncertainty, facing mortality, facing truth, alone. Or maybe not anymore. And for the first time that night, Simone's anger wasn't the loudest emotion inside her. Fear was. Fear of what this could mean. Fear of what she still felt. Fear of losing him all over again. Simone cried silently. The tears came faster now. Unstoppable. Years of buried pain. Years of anger. Years of unanswered questions. All colliding with one devastating truth. Alexander might be seriously ill. The man she spent 10 years trying to forget. The man who broke her. The man she still hadn't fully healed from. Might be facing a battle bigger than both of them. And suddenly, everything felt different. Her anger still existed. Her pain still existed. But something more powerful had taken over. Fear. Raw. Overwhelming. Human. She stared at Alexander. Really stared at him. And now she noticed things she had missed earlier. The exhaustion in his eyes. The faint paleness in his face. The subtle tension in his posture. Small details. But now, they screamed at her. How had she missed it? Or maybe, she was too consumed by pain to see anything else. Her voice came out broken. When is the surgery? Alexander answered quietly. 2 weeks. Simone shut her eyes briefly. 2 weeks. The number hit hard. Too close. Too soon. Her breathing turned uneven again. She hated this. Hated what this truth was doing to her. Because no matter how much pain Alexander caused, one unbearable truth remained. She still cared. Deeply. And that realization terrified her. She wiped at her tears. Frustrated. Confused. Angry at herself. Alexander watched her carefully. His voice lowered. You don't owe me anything. Simone laughed bitterly through tears. That's not helping. Alexander's expression softened. Pain visible. I mean it. Simone shook her head. No. Her voice cracked. No, don't do that. Alexander frowned slightly. Do what? Simone looked directly at him. Emotion pouring through. Don't stand there acting like this doesn't matter. Silence. Her breathing shook. You don't get to drop something like this on me and expect me to just... Her voice broke. Be okay. Alexander's chest tightened. Because he knew this was unfair. He hated putting this weight on her, but truth had demanded honesty. Simone stepped back, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to understand her own heart. But everything inside felt chaotic. Her voice lowered, barely controlled. I hate this. Alexander remained still. Simone shook her head, tears returning. I hate that after everything. She laughed painfully. I still care. The confession hit both of them hard. Silence stretched. Heavy. Emotional. Real. Alexander's voice came rough. Simone. She cut him off immediately. No. She shook her head, eyes glistening. You don't get to say my name like nothing happened. That landed. Alexander nodded slowly. Fair. Completely fair. Simone looked away toward the city skyline. Her voice softened. Painfully vulnerable now. For 10 years. A pause. I worked so hard to move on. Alexander stayed silent. Listening. She continued. I rebuilt myself. I rebuilt my confidence. I rebuilt my trust. Her voice cracked again. I taught myself how to survive without you. Alexander felt each word, because every sentence carried both strength and pain. Simone turned back toward him, tears falling freely. And now, you're standing here telling me. Her voice broke completely. That you might be sick. Silence. She shook her head. Anger and heartbreak colliding. That's cruel. Alexander's expression fell, because she was right. Again, truth didn't erase the cruelty of timing. Simone's next words came from somewhere deep, raw, unfiltered. Do you have any idea what this is doing to me? Alexander's voice lowered. No. Simone stared, then answered for him. It's tearing me apart. The truth sat heavily between them. Because this wasn't simple. This wasn't a fairy tale reunion. This was messy, complicated, painful, human. Simone loved a man she didn't fully trust. A man who deeply hurt her. A man she now feared losing forever. And none of those truths cancelled each other out. That was the painful complexity of love. Alexander took a slow breath, then spoke, his voice calm, gentle. I'm not asking for anything. Simone frowned. Alexander held her gaze. Not forgiveness. Not love. Not another chance. Silence. He continued. I just couldn't go into surgery with lies still between us. That truth landed differently. Because it felt real. Not manipulative. Not strategic. Just honest. Alexander's next words came quietly. If this is the last conversation we ever have. Simone's face tightened instantly. She hated hearing that, he noticed, but continued. I needed it to be honest. Silence. His voice softened further. For once, Simone's tears slowed, not because pain disappeared, but because something inside her shifted. Truth. For the first time in years, there were no lies here, no masks, no manipulation, just truth. Ugly truth, painful truth, necessary truth. Simone stared at him for a long moment, then finally asked the question buried beneath everything else. The question her heart feared most. Her voice came barely above a whisper. Do you still love me? Silence. Alexander froze. Then, something inside him softened completely. His answer came without hesitation, without calculation, without fear. Yes. One word. Simple, certain, powerful. His eyes held hers. Steady, raw, completely honest. Yes. A pause. Then, I never stopped. The words shattered whatever remained of Simone's emotional walls. Fresh tears fell instantly. Because deep down, a painful truth had been living inside her too. A truth she had spent years burying. A truth she never wanted to face. But tonight, she could no longer deny it. Because love this deep doesn't disappear easily. Sometimes it hides. Sometimes it hardens. Sometimes it gets buried under pain. But sometimes it refuses to die. And Simone was beginning to realize something terrifying. Despite everything, a part of her still loved him too. The silence between them felt overwhelming. Heavy, emotional, dangerously fragile. Alexander's confession still lingered in the air. I never stopped. Simone stood motionless, her chest rising and falling unevenly. Because now, there was nowhere left to hide. Not behind anger, not behind pride, not behind old wounds. The truth had surfaced. Raw, painful, unavoidable. Alexander still loved her. And the terrifying part? A part of her still loved him too. That truth unsettled her deeply. Because love was supposed to make things clearer, simpler. But right now, love made everything messier, more complicated, more painful. Simone slowly turned away. Her hands trembled slightly. She stared at the city lights below, trying to steady herself, trying to think. But her thoughts were chaos. 10 years of pain. 10 years of healing. 10 years of rebuilding. All colliding with one impossible question. What now? What was she supposed to do with this truth? What was she supposed to do with him? She closed her eyes. Her voice came quiet. Fragile. I don't know what to do. Alexander stayed still behind her. His voice came low. Honest. You don't have to decide anything tonight. Simone laughed bitterly. A broken laugh. That's easy for you to say. Alexander said nothing, because she was right. Nothing about this was easy. Simone shook her head, emotion rising again. You've turned my entire world upside down in one night. She turned back to face him, tears glistening again. Her voice trembled. I came here tonight, focused on work. A bitter laugh escaped. And now, she looked directly at him. Now I can barely breathe. Alexander's chest tightened painfully, because this was exactly what he feared, hurting her all over again. Simone's voice softened, painfully honest now. I hate that I still care. A pause. I hate that hearing about your diagnosis scared me. Another painful breath. And I hate that some part of me still wants to protect you. Silence. Heavy. Real. Alexander looked at her. Raw emotion visible. Simone. She lifted a hand, stopping him. No. Her voice steadied slightly. I need to say this. Alexander nodded. She inhaled deeply, then spoke the truth she had buried for years. You broke me. Silence. Alexander's face tightened. Simone continued, her voice shaking. For a long time. A pause. I didn't just grieve losing you. Her eyes filled again. I grieved losing myself. The confession landed heavily. Pain radiated from every word. Simone's breathing grew uneven. You made me question my worth. You made me question love. You made me question whether trusting anyone was safe. Alexander felt crushed under the weight of her truth. Because this was the real cost of his choices, not just heartbreak, trauma, deep emotional damage. Simone wiped her tears, trying to stay composed. But I fought. Her voice strengthened slightly. I healed. I rebuilt. I became stronger. Alexander saw it. Every word was true. The woman in front of him was strong because she survived pain. Because she rebuilt herself from the wreckage. Simone held his gaze. Firm now. Clear. And I refuse to lose myself again. That sentence carried enormous weight. Because this was her boundary. Her truth. Her protection. Alexander nodded slowly. Understanding. Respect. Pain. All at once. I don't want you to... Simone studied him carefully, searching for dishonesty, manipulation, control. She found none. Only vulnerability. Only truth. That unsettled her even more. Because this Alexander was different. Not fixed. Not perfect. But different. Simone's voice lowered. What if I stay? A pause. The question terrified her. What if I let you back in? Her breathing slowed. Eyes locked onto his. What if I trust you again? Silence. Then, the deepest fear. What if you break me all over again? The question hit like a knife. Because that was the heart of everything. Trust. Trust, once broken, is painfully difficult to rebuild. Alexander didn't answer immediately. He thought carefully. Because this question deserved honesty. Complete honesty. When he finally spoke, his voice came low. Gentle. I can't promise I'll never hurt you. Simone frowned slightly. The answer surprised her. Alexander continued. Because we're human. We're flawed. We make mistakes. Silence. Then. But I can promise this. His eyes held hers. Steady. Powerful. No more lies. A pause. No more silence. Another pause. No more deciding for you. Simone's heart tightened. Because those words touched the deepest wound. Alexander's voice softened further. If you let me into your life again. A painful breath. It will only be through truth. Silence. Raw. Meaningful. Then, the most powerful promise of all. Even when truth is ugly. Something inside Simone shifted. Just slightly. Not full trust. Not forgiveness. But something. The tiniest crack in the wall. And sometimes, that is where healing begins. The night stretched around them. Quiet. Still. The city lights below shimmered like distant stars, but neither Simone nor Alexander noticed. Everything between them had narrowed to this moment. This choice. This breath. This truth. Simone stood there, arms folded tightly across herself. Not from cold. From protection. Because after everything that had happened tonight, she felt exposed, raw, unsteady. And she hated feeling unsteady. For 10 years, she had built her life around certainty, control, structure, boundaries. Things Alexander once shattered. Things she worked hard to rebuild. And now, he stood in front of her again. Different. Broken in ways she never knew. Honest in ways he had never been before. And somehow, that honesty made him harder to hate. She exhaled slowly. Then asked the question her mind had been circling. When is your next appointment? Alexander blinked. surprised. He hadn't expected that. Not after everything. His voice came quiet. Monday. Simone nodded. Silence. Alexander searched her face, trying to understand, trying not to hope too quickly. Simone looked away toward the skyline again. Her voice came steady. I'm not doing this for you. Alexander stayed silent, listening. She continued. I'm doing this for me. A pause. Because if something happens to you, her voice tightened, I don't want more unfinished pain. That truth landed hard. Honest. Real. Alexander understood. This wasn't forgiveness. This wasn't reunion. This was something smaller, but important. Closure. Or maybe the possibility of something else. Simone turned back toward him. Her eyes were serious. Guarded. If I stay involved. A pause. It's on my terms. Alexander nodded immediately. Whatever you need. Simone's gaze sharpened. Don't say that unless you mean it. His answer came without hesitation. I mean it. She studied him carefully, looking for cracks, looking for manipulation, looking for the old Alexander. But he looked different, tired, open, vulnerable. For once, he wasn't trying to control the room. Or her. That mattered. Simone swallowed, then laid out her terms. First. Her voice was firm. No secrets. Alexander nodded. Agreed. Second. She held his gaze. No disappearing. That one hit harder, because it directly touched the deepest wound. Alexander answered softly. Agreed. Simone continued. Third. A pause. This does not mean we're together. Silence. Alexander felt that, but accepted it. Understood. Simone folded her arms again. And last. Her voice softened. Painfully so. You earn trust. Not demand it. Not expect it. Her eyes glistened. You earn it. Alexander's throat tightened. Because this was more than he deserved. A chance. Not at love. Not yet. But at truth. At accountability. At doing things right. This time. He nodded slowly. I will. Simone looked at him for a long moment. Then, spoke words that shifted everything. I'll go with you Monday. Alexander froze. Shock hit him. Because after everything, she was choosing to show up. Small, careful, but real. His voice came barely above a whisper. Why? Simone answered honestly. Because honesty was all that existed now. Because despite everything, a painful breath. I don't think I can watch you face this alone. The truth hit them both hard. Alexander looked away briefly. Emotion overwhelming. He wasn't used to this. Grace. Compassion. Especially from the person he hurt most. When he looked back at her, his eyes were wet. Not crying, but close. Thank you. Simone nodded once. Nothing more. Because gratitude didn't erase history. But it mattered. A sudden voice interrupted. Mr. Whitmore? They both turned. Marcus stood at the terrace entrance. Concern visible. Sorry to interrupt. He looked at Alexander. The board is asking for you. Alexander nodded. Coming? Marcus glanced at Simone. Sensed everything. Said nothing. Then left. Alexander turned back to Simone. The moment between them shifted again. Fragile. Uncertain. Simone stepped away first, putting distance back. Necessary distance. Her voice returned to businesslike calm. The gala still needs finishing. Alexander almost smiled. Some things never changed. Simone started walking toward the doors. Then stopped. Without turning around, she spoke. One more thing. Alexander waited. Her voice came quiet. Honest. Don't make me regret this. The sentence hit deeply. Because it wasn't just about Monday. It was about everything. Trust. Truth. Second chances. Alexander answered with complete sincerity. I won't. Simone nodded once. Then walked back inside, leaving Alexander alone on the terrace. But for the first time in 10 years, he didn't feel entirely alone. Because tonight, for the first time, Simone hadn't walked away for good. And sometimes, healing doesn't begin with forgiveness. Sometimes it begins with simply choosing to stay. Monday came faster than either of them expected. Too fast. The weekend passed in a blur of restless thoughts and heavy silence. Simone tried to stay busy. Work, meetings, deadlines, schedules. But none of it fully distracted her. Her mind kept returning to Alexander, to the diagnosis, to the surgery, to the truth that now sat heavily between them. For years, Alexander had existed as pain, a wound, a memory, someone buried in the past. But now, he felt real again. Painfully real. And that changed everything. Monday morning arrived cold and grey. The kind of morning that felt heavy before the day even began. Simone sat inside her car outside New York Presbyterian Hospital, hands gripping the steering wheel. Her heart pounded. She almost didn't come. 3 times during the drive, she nearly turned around. This felt dangerous, emotionally dangerous, because showing up mattered. Showing up meant caring, and caring meant vulnerability. Still, she came, because, despite everything, she gave her word. And Simone Carter kept her word. She took a deep breath, then stepped out. Inside the hospital lobby, everything smelled sterile. Clean, cold. People moved quietly. Doctors, nurses, families, patients. The environment carried a strange emotional weight. Fear, hope, uncertainty, all existing together. Simone spotted Alexander near the neurology wing waiting area. He stood near the windows, hands in pockets, still, calm, at least outwardly. But Simone noticed something immediately. He looked exhausted, not physically alone. Emotionally, his usual confidence felt absent. The powerful billionaire image wasn't here. Just a man facing something terrifying. Alone. Until now. Alexander looked up, saw her, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, relief, something softer, something deeper. Simone walked toward him. Professional composure, intact, even now. Morning. Alexander stared at her for a second, almost like he couldn't believe she actually came. Then his voice came low. Morning. A brief silence followed. Awkward. Fragile. Simone glanced around. How long have you been here? 20 minutes. She frowned. You came early. Alexander gave a faint smile. So did you. Simone almost responded, almost smiled, but stopped herself. Too dangerous. Still too soon. She folded her arms lightly. How are you feeling? The question sounded simple, but both knew it wasn't. Alexander exhaled, then gave the most honest answer possible. Terrified. The honesty caught her off guard, because old Alexander would never have said that. Never. He would have hidden behind strength, control, confidence. But today, he was just honest, raw, human. And somehow, that honesty touched her more than she expected. Simone studied him, then quietly said, That makes 2 of us. Alexander blinked. Something softened in his expression. Then the smallest smile touched his lips. Not arrogance, not charm, just genuine warmth. And for a brief second, the tension between them eased. A nurse approached. Mr. Whitmore? Alexander turned. Yes? We're ready for imaging. Alexander nodded. The nurse glanced at Simone. Family? The question hung in the air. Simone froze. Alexander stayed still. The word hit differently than either expected. Family. No, not exactly, but somehow. Not strangers, either. Simone answered carefully. I'm here with him. The nurse smiled politely. You can wait here, or join him, until prep begins. Alexander looked at Simone. He wouldn't ask, wouldn't pressure. The choice was hers, always hers now. Simone felt that, and, strangely, that mattered. She looked at Alexander, really looked at him. Fear lived plainly in his eyes now. No masks, no shields, just fear. Her heart tightened. Then she made her choice. I'll come. Alexander said nothing, but gratitude flashed across his face. The imaging room was quiet, clinical, bright, uncomfortable. As technicians prepared equipment, Alexander sat silently. Simone stood nearby, watching, thinking, feeling too much. The silence between them felt different now, less hostile, more vulnerable. After a while, Alexander spoke, quietly. I almost called you on Friday. Simone looked at him. He continued. After the gala, a pause. I wanted to thank you. Simone frowned slightly. For what? Alexander met her gaze. For staying. The words landed softly, but deeply. Simone looked away. Her voice came quiet. Don't read too much into this. Alexander nodded. Fair. Still. He smiled faintly. Too late. Simone almost rolled her eyes. Almost. And somehow, that tiny moment felt strangely familiar. Comforting. Dangerously comforting. A technician approached. We're ready. Alexander stood. But, before moving toward the machine, he stopped. Then turned to Simone. His voice lowered. Raw. Honest. If something goes wrong? Simone's expression changed instantly. No. Alexander continued softly. I need to say this. Simone shook her head. No. Emotion rose sharply. She hated where this was going. Alexander held her gaze. Calm. Gentle. If something happens. His voice softened further. I need you to know something. Simone's eyes glistened. Fear rising fast. Alexander's next words landed with devastating sincerity. You showing up today means more than you know. Silence. Her chest tightened painfully. He continued, for the first time in years. A pause. I don't feel alone. Simone's throat tightened. Emotion flooded her. Because, deep down, she knew something too. She didn't feel as distant from him anymore either. And that realization scared her more than anything. The waiting room felt unbearably quiet. Too quiet. Simone sat alone in a chair near the window, hands clasped tightly, leg bouncing slightly. Her usual calm had completely disappeared. Minutes felt like hours. Every second stretched painfully. Her mind refused to stay still. It wandered, backward, through years of memories. The first coffee shop meeting, late-night conversations, rooftop dreams, the breakup, the silence, the pain, and now this. How had life brought them here? After everything, how had they ended up in a hospital waiting room carrying years of love, regret, and unresolved pain? Simone leaned back, exhaled shakily. She hated this feeling. The helplessness, the waiting, the fear. Because fear stripped away illusions. Fear exposed truth. And the truth Simone was trying desperately not to face was becoming impossible to ignore. She still loved him. Maybe not in the same innocent way she once did. Not untouched, not simple. But love was still there. Buried beneath pain. Beneath betrayal. Beneath fear. Still alive. That realization terrified her. Because love meant risk. Love meant vulnerability. Love meant the possibility of being broken again. And Simone wasn't sure she could survive that twice. The door opened. Simone shot to her feet instantly. Alexander stepped out with the doctor. Her heart pounded violently. She searched his face, trying to read something, anything. The doctor gave a small professional smile. Miss Carter? Simone nodded quickly. The doctor continued. The imaging is encouraging. The tension in her chest loosened slightly. Slightly. The doctor continued. The tumor appears stable. Simone exhaled. Her knees nearly weakened from relief. The doctor kept speaking. Surgery is still recommended, but the stability is a positive sign. Positive. The word echoed. Relief flooded her so suddenly, it almost hurt. Alexander remained quiet beside the doctor, still processing. The doctor continued explaining technical details. Risks, procedure timelines, recovery expectations. Simone heard pieces, but emotion overwhelmed logic. Because one truth hit her hard. He still had a chance. A real chance. The doctor eventually left. Silence followed. Simone turned toward Alexander. Their eyes met. Neither spoke immediately. Then something unexpected happened. The walls broke. Completely. Simone crossed the distance between them in seconds. And before logic could stop her, she threw her arms around him. Alexander froze, shock flooding through him, because for one impossible second, he thought he imagined it. But no, Simone was holding him, tightly, her arms around him, her face pressed against him, and she was shaking, trembling, crying. Relief poured out of her all at once. Alexander slowly lifted his arms, carefully, like he feared the moment would disappear. Then he held her, gently, securely, like something precious, something sacred. The contact shattered them both emotionally, because it felt familiar, painfully familiar, and deeply healing. Simone cried openly now. No control, no masks, just raw emotion. Alexander held her silently, one hand resting gently against her back. Steady, grounding, safe. When Simone finally spoke, her voice was broken. You scared me. The words hit him hard, because they carried enormous meaning. Not anger, not bitterness, just truth. Alexander closed his eyes briefly, emotion flooding through him. His voice came soft. I'm sorry. Simone tightened her grip, still crying, still shaking. I hate you. The words were muffled against his chest. Alexander almost laughed, almost cried, because even now, that sounded so painfully human. His voice softened. No, you don't. Simone pulled back slightly, just enough to look at him. Tears streaming, eyes red, emotion overflowing. She stared at him, then finally said the truth she had spent years running from. Her voice broke completely. No. A painful breath. I don't. Silence. Everything stopped. Because this was it. The truth. Raw. Unavoidable. Simone's tears fell harder. I tried. She shook her head. Voice shattered. I tried so hard to hate you. Alexander's chest tightened painfully. Simone looked directly into his eyes, and every wall fell. Every last one. Her next words changed everything. I still love you. Silence. Pure silence. Alexander stared at her, unable to breathe, unable to move, unable to process. Because despite every hope, every dream, he never truly believed he would hear those words again. Simone cried openly, frustrated, broken open, angry at herself, angry at love. I hate that I still love you. Her voice trembled violently. I hate how much this still hurts. Alexander's eyes filled instantly. Emotion overwhelmed him. Because this wasn't easy love. This was love tested by pain, refined by suffering, made raw by truth. And somehow, still alive. Alexander lifted a trembling hand to her face, slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. He gently wiped her tears. His own voice cracked now. Simone. She stared at him, vulnerable, exposed, terrified. Alexander's next words came with complete honesty. I love you too. A pause. I never stopped. Fresh tears fell from Simone's eyes. Because deep down, she knew. She always knew. And now, there were no lies left. No masks. No distance. Just two broken people standing in truth. And sometimes, truth is where healing truly begins. Neither of them moved. The hospital hallway faded into silence around them. Doctors passed. Nurses moved quietly. Phones buzzed. Machines beeped in the distance. But for Alexander and Simone, none of it mattered. The world had narrowed to this moment. This truth, this confession. Simone had finally said the words she fought for years to bury. I still love you. And now, everything had changed. Not because love erased pain. It didn't. Not because confession fixed the past. It couldn't. But because truth had finally replaced silence. And truth changed everything. Alexander stood in front of Simone, overwhelmed by emotion. For years, he had dreamed of this moment, imagined it, prayed for it. A second chance, not at perfection, just at honesty, at love without lies, at connection without fear. And somehow, against all odds, that possibility now stood in front of him. Fragile, beautiful, terrifying. Simone stepped back first, creating just enough space to breathe, because this was still overwhelming. Too much, too fast, too emotional. She wiped her tears, trying to regain control, trying to steady her thoughts. Alexander gave her space. No pressure, no demands, just patience. That mattered. Simone inhaled slowly, then spoke. Her voice came soft, raw, honest. Loving you again isn't the hard part. Alexander's chest tightened. She held his gaze. The hard part is trusting you again. Silence. Heavy. True. Alexander nodded slowly. Because that was the heart of everything. Trust. Love had survived. Trust had not. And rebuilding trust would require more than emotion, more than tears, more than confessions. It would require consistency, time, action, truth. Simone crossed her arms lightly. A protective habit. Her voice steadied. I need you to understand something. Alexander listened carefully. Simone continued. This isn't a movie. A pause. This doesn't magically become okay because we admitted we still love each other. Alexander nodded. I know. Simone studied him, making sure he truly understood. Love is not enough. The sentence landed deeply, because it carried one of the most important truths in the story. Love alone doesn't sustain relationships. Trust does. Communication does. Emotional maturity does. Alexander answered quietly. You're right, Simone continued. If this is going to be anything, a pause, anything at all. Her eyes held his. It has to be different. Alexander didn't hesitate. It will be. Simone frowned slightly. That sounds nice. Upbeat. But words are easy. Alexander accepted that. Completely. Simone's voice softened. Pain still visible. You said beautiful things 10 years ago too. That hit hard. Because again, she was right. Promises mean nothing without actions. Alexander met her gaze, then said something simple. Powerful. Honest. Then don't trust my words. Simone blinked slightly. Alexander continued, his voice steady. Trust what I do. Silence. The answer surprised her, because there was no defensiveness, no wounded ego. Just accountability. Alexander took a slow breath, then continued, I know I don't deserve instant forgiveness. I know I don't deserve instant trust. His voice softened. Honestly. A faint sad smile touched his lips. I don't deserve much from you at all. Simone frowned. She didn't like hearing that. Not because he was wrong, but because pity wasn't what she wanted. Alexander noticed, then clarified. I'm not asking you to rescue me. That mattered a lot. He continued, I'm not asking you to ignore the past. I'm not asking you to pretend I didn't hurt you. His eyes held hers. Raw. Steady. I'm asking for the chance to do better. Silence. Simone's chest tightened, because this felt different. Not desperate. Not manipulative. Not controlling. Just honest. A man finally taking responsibility. Her voice lowered. You hurt me deeply. Alexander nodded. I know. Simone's eyes glistened. And some part of me is still scared of you. That confession hurt, but it mattered. Alexander answered gently. I know. She studied him for a long moment, then asked the question that truly mattered. The question beyond love, beyond feelings, beyond fear. Her voice came quiet. Serious. Who are you now, Alexander? Silence. The question landed powerfully, because she wasn't asking about the billionaire, or the public figure. She was asking something deeper. Who had pain shaped him into? Who was the man standing before her now? Alexander exhaled slowly, then answered with complete honesty. I'm still learning. Simone stayed silent, listening. Alexander continued. I know what fear can destroy. I know what silence costs. A pause. I know what pride can ruin. His voice lowered. And I know what it feels like to lose the best thing in your life because you were too afraid to be honest. Silence. Then, I never want to be that man again. The words landed deeply, because they felt earned, not polished, not rehearsed, just real. And for the first time, in a very long time, Simone felt something she never expected to feel with Alexander again. Hope. Small, fragile, but real. And sometimes, hope is where second chances begin. Hope. It was small, fragile, dangerous, but it was there. And after everything, that alone felt monumental. Simone stood quietly, studying Alexander, really studying him. The man before her was not the same man she loved 10 years ago. Nor was he the same man who destroyed her. Pain had changed him. Failure had changed him. Loss had changed him. And truth had changed him. But change alone wasn't enough. Trust still had to be rebuilt. Slowly, carefully, honestly. Simone exhaled slowly, then spoke, her voice calm, steady. This doesn't end here. Alexander's chest tightened. He waited. Simone continued. But this also doesn't magically become a happy ending overnight. Alexander nodded. He understood. Completely. Simone held his gaze. If there's going to be something between us. A pause. It happens slowly. Her tone was firm. Clear. No room for misunderstanding. Alexander listened carefully. Simone continued. No rushing. No pressure. No emotional shortcuts. Each word carried weight. Because this was her boundary. Her protection. Her terms. Alexander nodded slowly. Okay. Simone crossed her arms lightly. Still guarded. Still careful. And if you shut down. A pause. If you disappear. Another pause. If you lie. Her eyes locked onto his. We're done. Silence. The message was clear. This was not unconditional access. This was not blind forgiveness. This was earned trust. Alexander answered without hesitation. I understand. Simone studied him, searching for hesitation. She found none. Good. Her voice softened. Just slightly. Trust isn't rebuilt through promises. Alexander nodded. Through consistency. A faint smile touched Simone's lips. For the first time in what felt like forever. Yes. The small smile hit Alexander harder than he expected. Because it reminded him of her. The Simone he loved. Still there. Still alive. Still strong. Simone glanced away briefly. Then back at him. Her next words came softer. More vulnerable. But. Alexander waited. Simone's eyes glistened. I'm willing to see where this goes. Silence. Alexander froze. The words hit him deeply. Because he understood exactly what they meant. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Not a fairy tale reset. Something more realistic. More meaningful. A chance. A real chance. Small. Fragile. Earned. Alexander's voice came rough. Emotional. That's more than I deserve. Simone raised an eyebrow slightly. Don't make me regret saying that. A quiet laugh escaped Alexander. Real. Warm. It had been years since laughter felt this genuine. He shook his head. I won't. Simone stared at him. Then sighed softly. A mixture of exhaustion and relief. So. A pause. What happens now? Alexander thought for a moment, then gave an answer that felt right. Honest, simple. We start small. Simone frowned slightly. How small? Alexander's eyes softened. Then, a gentle smile touched his face. Coffee. Simone blinked, then stared, and for a second, silence. Then, something unexpected happened. She laughed. A real laugh. Soft, warm, beautiful. It caught both of them off guard. Alexander smiled too. Simone shook her head. Through the laughter, she spoke. Coffee? Alexander shrugged lightly. We started with coffee. Silence. But this silence felt different. Warm, gentle, healing. Simone looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time in years, the pain wasn't the loudest thing between them. Truth was. Growth was. Possibility was. Her voice came quiet. Honest. One coffee. Alexander smiled softly. One coffee. A pause. Then Simone stepped closer. Not fully closing the distance. But enough. Enough to signal something important. She reached for his hand. Lightly. Carefully. Alexander looked down. Then back at her. Emotion flooded him instantly. Because this small gesture carried enormous meaning. Trust wasn't restored, but something had begun. Simone held his gaze. Her final words carried the deepest lesson of all. You were wrong about one thing. Alexander frowned slightly. What? Simone's voice softened. Pain and wisdom living together. You don't protect people by shutting them out. Silence. She continued. You protect love with honesty. The words landed powerfully. Alexander felt them deeply, because they carried the central truth of everything. The lesson both of them had paid dearly to learn. Simone gave his hand a gentle squeeze, then let go. Not because she was pulling away, but because healing had to happen one step at a time. One honest step. One truthful conversation. One consistent action. At a time. Weeks later, Alexander's surgery was successful. Recovery was difficult, but hopeful. And throughout that journey, Simone stayed, not as a perfect ending, not as a fairy tale, but as something real. She showed up. Coffee visits, doctor appointments, quiet conversations, slow rebuilding, slow healing. And Alexander kept his promise. No lies, no silence, no disappearing, just truth. Even when truth was hard, especially when truth was hard. Months later, one quiet evening, they sat together in a small coffee shop in Brooklyn. The same place where everything began. Simone smiled over her coffee. Alexander looked at her, warmth filling his chest. Not certainty, not perfection. Something better. Peace, growth, hope, real love. Because real love isn't perfect. It isn't effortless. It doesn't survive on feelings alone. Real love requires truth, courage, communication, and choice. Every day. One honest choice at a time. And this time, they were finally choosing each other. The right way. Together. What a journey. Alexander and Simone's story reminds us of something powerful. Love alone is not enough. Without honesty, trust can break. Without communication, silence can destroy even the deepest love. Now I want to hear from you. What is the biggest lesson you learned from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to Love Stories by Mr. Johnson for more powerful love stories filled with real emotions and life lessons. See you in the next story.